All right, I want to welcome everybody to the June 2025 meeting of the Parrot Club. Tonight, we're having a roundtable discussion with bird behavior consultant and trainer Sheila Blanchette about avian certifications and expertise. We'll discuss what certifications exist for avian medicine, avian behavior, avian training, etc., and what they really mean. We will talk about what makes someone an avian expert and what qualifications do or do not matter. We will discuss We will discuss what sources of information are reputable and how we can trust that we are getting good information. With so many people out there claiming to have the answers to all our bird questions and problems, who should we trust? Is there a right and wrong or just differences of opinions and techniques? Sheila is a professional certified companion bird behavior trainer. Sheila owns and operates Heart of Feathers Education and Behavior Training since 2015. She offers in-home and online behavior and training assistance for companion birds. She's worked with several animal and bird rescues in the New England area in assisting with bird behavior. She's written articles for Pet Professional Guild Bark magazine and others. And in July of 2024, Sheila accepted the position of Director of Education for Rhode Island Parrot Rescue, assisting part-time to grow their public companion bird education programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Sheila now.
Well, thank you, Amy. That was a wonderful introduction. And I want to once again thank you for the opportunity for this discussion. I like, I do like presenting things, but I like having open discussions. And I asked Amy about this opportunity to kind of just bring open discussion. And I may ask her again to do more of these, right? Because there's always questions people have. And I'm going to tell her I am not an expert. I am not, I will say I'm a professional who's been out there for a while. I do not know everything, but I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I've been mentored by some, I'm not going to name drop, but I've had some other people who I got mentored on. And I know a lot of the certified bird trainers out there. So I want to make sure when we're talking, there'll be no name dropping, but I want to give information to make sure when you're looking, well, what questions do I ask? What do I do? How do I know? So that's what we're kind of doing. And I looked up because Amy and I were having this discussion. See, it came up with this discussion. Well, what is an expert, right? What defines an expert? And I had to go, I think, Amy, you gave me yesterday one definition. I ended up going up to the Webster Dictionary and saying, well, what defines an expert? But what I thought was interesting of the definition near the end of it, right? And I think this is what we forget, right? It's sufficient that others may officially or legally rely upon the individual's opinion on that topic, right? Like they know more of this topic, but it also depends on you got to remember on the other side, the person receiving the information too, right? We have to make when we're looking at a professional, and I always, talk about, like when I go to my doctor, right? And I ask a question, they might know something out there, but they may not be a specialist. And what do? They send you to someone else because they say, I'm not an expert on that. And they send you to someone else. Of course, a lot of us get passed around.
I'm going to interrupt a second. And something Sheila and I were discussing yesterday was you can pretty much bet that if someone says they're an expert and they know everything, that they are neither an expert nor do they know everything. I think we all know that the people who are the experts will be the first ones to tell you that they're not experts. Anyone who says they're an expert probably is. So that's just been my personal experience.
Right. And and since we're having this open discussion, we'll move into a lot of this stuff. I always feel like and we'll go into it in a minute, if you stop learning, right? If you say, I know everything, then that's kind of weird too, because there's always new stuff. You're always learning. We're human. We should always be learning. We're always adjusting to it. And I always feel like those people, and you probably know these people in your world where they learn something, but then they find something else, and they just keep building on their education. So I think it's a learning process. You're always learning, and you're just trying to get. I always I'm just trying to get. I'm trying to build everybody up to come up to that. Not bring them up to these knowledges and these new things, so they question it as well. I'm always questioning things. So one of the things I went and did I was doing some research, just trying to figure out we're going to step back from avian certification, practices and all that for a second to say, well, what builds an expert, right? And I'm used to looking at reviewing like trade skills, like we know carpenters and all this, right? And they go through an apprenticeship where they got to go to classes and do all this stuff, and then they become a journeyman where they're kind of on their own, but then there's a master. And then there's a master, and we kind of know this, right? Because, right, they can show us accreditations, they can show us their license, maybe they can show us their work, maybe, and I found this one, and I thought this was a great answer. They produce solutions to problems based on previous experience and training. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing, right? That they can, and I thought that's a good little quote right there. They produce solutions from problems based on experience and knowledge. I thought, I like that statement, but but they should be training other people, right? When we look at avian training, I'm going to call it, and Amy and I were having this discussion. This was kind of coming out of, in a sense, not exactly, it came out of two branches, but it kind of came out of dog training. Where at one point in life, there were dog trainers, but it was for protection, dog protection. And then it kind of built down to people who had pet dogs. And then from there, it kind of built to there's cat trainers and like it kind of all kind of did this. And that's why there's books and people, because there was a need at that time, right? And again, I'm with Amy. I can remember 40 years ago, God, that seems so long ago. If you had a bird, you got a book and you might have the vet, and those were your options. And if neither one worked, I don't know. You got a silly bird. I don't know, right? Like or you're doing something wrong, or So when when people are looking for information, what's the first place we look? We go on the internet. We look for free resources. It's kind of like WebMD. We have a problem. We go to WebMD and start trying to figure out our problem. And I always feel like that's when we're looking for when we have an avian issue. What's the first thing we do, right? Well, let me ask my friend, right? So and what I did in this little chart real quick is kind of questioning the person, where we're getting it and what might become the outcomes. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I always, you ask your bird is doing something and you ask your friend, oh, what do you think? What is this? And sometimes you get what I call confirmation bias. If you accidentally said, oh, I think my bird is dominant because he's humping my head, right? Your friend might go, oh yeah, that's what it is. And now you have an answer, but it doesn't really resolve anything, but you go, okay. And that, I don't know if that person's an expert, but they confirmed your thought, right? And so that's, right, this sort of builds, right, when we're looking for information. We go on the internet, we read articles, but are they date checked? Who checks them? They may resolve your problem. I'm not saying some of these things don't, but I always say be careful of what you read, right? Just double check things. And that's what I had on this slide, is just to say, when you're looking at that article that's free, check the date. Where's the knowledge coming from? And social media groups. I'm not on Facebook that much, and I'm sorry for all of you who might follow me on Facebook. Go, Sheila, you don't put anything on there. I'm not much of a social media. I should be, and I got to get on it. But when I go to groups, right, and you post an issue, right? You say, hey, I got this thing. You may get 50 different answers, right? Now, there may be one person in that group who probably might have answered your question properly, but it's in the thread of all these others. The other thing I always find with social media, you put this question and there's always somebody who's like, oh my God, you're not taking care of your bird, blah, blah, blah. Like they shame you. And that's not right. That is not our job as anybody. We should not, this is time to share knowledge. And so, and the same thing with YouTube. So I wanted people to be aware. It's okay to go look for free resources. Just be aware, right, of what may come out of it and take it with a grain of salt. But you may be able to use it, and that's what I kind of put in here. You may be able to use it to network to a good resource, and that's what I'm using Amy for, right? I'm going to point to Amy here to say that sometimes I've seen her comment something, and boy, I know she's a good resource. I'll refer to her because I've seen her input. She puts research papers on there. Oh, I know what she's doing. So she's a good person I might contact later.
Yeah, I was telling Sheila we were talking yesterday. I was giving an example, a non-bird example. So I'm on Nextdoor, and probably a lot of you are. And someone will post a picture of a flower or an animal and say, this is in my yard, what is it? And 10 people will jump in and 9 of the answers will be wrong. And then I'll put the answer in because I'll know what the animal is or what the flower is. But I also know that there's no reason why anyone's going to believe me over the other 9 answers. And why should they? My answer looks equivalent. So I'll put a reference in there. I'll put a link to a picture of that flower, of that animal. So you have to give, even if you know you're right, you have to give people a reason to believe that you're right. And then maybe after a certain amount of time, if you're on a certain bird forum or something, and you've given good answers many times, or you've read someone else's good answers many times, at some point, people will say, well, this person knows what they're talking about. You or that person may not need to provide references anymore, but until you get established as a person of at least decent amount of knowledge, you have to back it up with something.
Right.
Bonnie Rabbit, many times the admin kicks you out if you don't agree with them. Yeah, I mean, I'm not on social media a lot, but I've heard many stories where that is the case, that on bird forums, on mommy,
anything,
on anything, you come in with the thing that is the truth, but you get kicked out because you're not echoing other people's false comments. So
right.
How do you prove that you are the right answer? Well, sometimes social media forums, they don't want the right answer. They just want
confirmation bias.
Or they just want to vent about something. Right. So, if you're online, it may be an issue of just that's not the right place for you, and you should leave and go someplace else where people are going to behave better, or they're going to they're going to actually accept facts rather than what they want to accept.
Right. And this is the same. I just want to show people, there are out there for avian studies, bird training studies, sorry. There are YouTube videos, there are online, and they're books, right? I mean, we've all seen them, we've all done them. And again, I always advise on those, take them with a grain of salt, but look at the ratings, look who's doing them, make sure it fits your criteria too, right? I mean, some of the YouTube, there are some people who have instructional videos, and I say this to anybody who's ever talked to me, I say, depending on who's doing the instructional video or the online, I always say a bird's an individual, right? And so when they're giving the instructions, well, what's their experience? Are they training other birds? Are they just showing their personal birds, or are they out in the field or doing something? And again, it's okay if if the person is out in the field and they're showing stuff, as long as they're kind of saying, based on this bird and what I see and this and that, you say, okay, and then you can look at things. That's why I try to be careful of stuff. I mean, again, I don't want to name drop, but there are some online self-paces that are perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. I've seen them. I've even taken a few of them because I do. I go to other trainers and I take their courses because I'm always learning and I like to, so, and there's some that are fantastic and a few, okay, and there's others I think just they need to update it. Like it was probably right at that time, but new things have come out and they may need to update it. And Amy's knows this. I don't know, you guys can't see, but like you can't see it because my bookshelf's down for. I collect books. It used to be when Amy, you would have your little events, right? There'd be this section of old books and you'd be like, well, I can't do anything. And I'd be sitting there taking them. Because why I have those books is because when I'm talking to somebody, they'll say something and I've heard it before. And I'll say, do you use one of these books? And I'm trying to figure out where they got their information. So then I can say, okay, now I know what book, I know what author, when was this book written? So I can kind of get them to say, how about we get to this book instead, right? Go to the next one. So, but that's why I'm not, yes, some books are really outdated. And I've got some really old ones. But if you know that, right, if you're aware of it and you're just reading it to catch up on something, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're using it as your expert, I would just say, let's double check some things. Let's just do some fact checking. So I wanted to get into that, but now the next part, which is the part Amy and I are opening up for big discussion.
Yeah, so Sheila, I wish I had known that because I found a whole bunch of additional older books we had in our library, and I ended up, as much as it broke my heart, because throwing out book to me is kind of, it's hard. But I couldn't bring them to my library for their book sale because they were old, and I couldn't sell them or give them away from the club because they're old, so I ended up having to throw them out. But and I would just given them all to you, but it's
yeah, I have them in other places because again, to all of you because somewhere somebody has that book, whatever book somebody has it, and that's what they're using as their reference guide. And as long as I know it, right, that helps communication when I'm talking to somebody because then I know where they got their information from.
And the problem is with those older parrot books, about 90% of the information is still good information.
Yeah.
And those of us, probably everybody here on the meeting is able to pick up one of those books and go, okay, good, 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 good. Oh no, that's changed. Good, good, good.
Right.
But your average parrot person out there isn't going to have the knowledge to do that. So when they pick up the book, they don't know what's correct and what's not correct.
Right. And it's so again, I'm not saying to everybody throw out your book. I'm just saying just keep, put little stickies on places that you want to go back and double check. So when we're talking about, we're going to move into this now bigger discussion of, well, what's, in the avian world, and there's a whole bunch of people out there, how do we define their credentials? What really defines them, right? Or what does it matter to you, right? And so I kind of broke it up into kind of 3 little sections. These are not like, oh, they're running parallel or they have to, but these are the questions you kind of have to kind of look at when people are putting this stuff on their websites, right? And they're trying to go through this. So there are bird courses out there. And, again, I'm not name dropping, but some of us have been them. And you're getting what I call completion of course certificate. It just says, hey, you completed the course. It just says, hey, you got some knowledge from this course. Thank you for coming. Great job. Here's a cute little, you completed course things. Depending if, they tell us what the course is, when you're looking at the credentials and they say, and I always tell people, you got to be careful of this because there are certifications and there are completing course certificates, two different things. And so when someone says on their thing, oh, I have a certificate for this, well, is it a certificate, which we'll go over in a minute, or is it I completed these courses certificate, right? They're different things. So that's why it's important to know that fine line. There are certifications, and we're gonna go through some of these so you guys can ask questions. And when I'm defining certifications, it also means it's a third-party exam, right? So it isn't like you fill in this little Q&A and stuff. Like you have to go to a third-party place and do this exam. College degrees, right? Do they need to have a college degree? And in what, right? Right? And I'm going to be one of these people that say, yes, I have a college degree in IT. I have an MBA, right? But I also have a third-party exam certification, right? I also have a certification in applied behavior analysis too.
I do want to, I'm going to interject there a second, if you don't mind.
That's what you want.
This is a very important point. You'll see people in the bird world and everywhere, they'll say, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and they'll say, I have a doctorate or I have a degree. Well, usually you see it with doctorates or with masters. But when you go to the web page and look at the bio, the advanced degree is something totally unrelated. So yes, they're legally allowed to call themselves Dr. So-and-so or say, I have a master's. But if it's unrelated to, say, birds or the specific thing you're looking for, who cares? So if they have a doctorate in engineering and they're trying to use that doctor to make it look like they're a bird expert, you need to be aware of that. You need to look and see what the actual degree is. If it's not related, then their education isn't helping them any more than someone else who has no education, or you, for example, whatever your education might be.
Right. Right. And that's, and again, it's up when you're looking at it. Amy makes a good point for when you're looking at credentials. If they're advertising it towards the avian thing, I'd be interested in the degree and how it associates. If they're not, like, again, I don't say on my little resume for birds, I have a degree in IT because it has no association, except that I could say, look, I know how to use Zoom and I can put the AI on. But other than that, and as we get going, and I'm going to use this for all of you, again, if they have an advanced degree, but what's the advanced degree in and how is it in the world? And again, there's veterinarian degrees, right? And we'll get into that a little bit. But again, in all of this, when you're looking for this person, you need, when you're looking at their credentials and what they do, is it important? And one of the questions I did put on here is it important that this trainer has experience or education in teaching? Because this person is teaching you something, right? So, especially in adult, and I've also recently learned in children, maybe not. Maybe they communicate quite well. I don't know, but again, this is an education. I'm going to slide over to experience, right? So now again, I call these all of these integers are very independent. It isn't like one's linked to the other. It's when you're looking at this person, because you want somebody who fits you and who you can communicate. So does the person, whoever you're talking to, do they have personal experience with companion birds, right? I like this one, if it's a breeder, right? Because there are breeders who have great education, but is there information they're giving you specific to that one companion bird, or are they doing a kind of multi, or you want to know this. Then it goes into experience with companion animals. Where is their experience in coming from? Back to, is it just their individual birds, or have they worked someplace or volunteered? I think both is fine, right? Because they're getting their experience. And it's with, one's with kind of, are they working with all animals or birds? And then is it specifically to companion birds? And is it specific to one or multiple, right? Because you really do want to know who you're working with. You may want to ask, right? It's an easy question to say, have you ever worked with this species, right? Or this group. And even if they go, yeah, you could always ask, okay, well, can you just give me a little rundown? And again, one of the questions it isn't, I'm going to put this question out there. Is it important to you for this question? If this trainer never experienced having their own companion bird, is that somebody you want to work with? It all depends, right? It all depends. I have companion birds. I've had several of them. And some of the people who I've talked to with think it's important only because because they want to know, have I experienced the same problems they had, right? So that's why I'm very straightforward, and if anybody's ever called me about something, I'm straightforward and go, oh yeah, 20 years ago I went through that. Oh yeah. Yeah. So I have the empathy of that problem.
Right. And Sheila and I were talking about this a lot yesterday, because just because somebody doesn't have that experience doesn't mean they're not knowledgeable. I mean, in the non-bird world, it's, there are plenty of women that will see a male gynecologist, even though obviously a male gynecologist has never experienced what it's like to be a woman. That may be important to you, may not be important to you. It doesn't mean that doctor is or is not a good doctor, but you have to think about if these things are important to you. And then, for example, with birds, we were talking about, well, someone might be really experienced with cockatiels, but if they've never been around an African gray, they're very different kinds of birds, and not just because they're different species, but because their behaviors tend to be very different. Though there are a lot of commonalities between all the species, and even within a species,
Right.
one African gray can be very different from another African gray. So does it matter how many African grays they may have trained? Maybe, maybe not. But these are things you want to think about when you're doing this. We're talking about how we know some avian vets that have their own companion birds, but there are also at least one very prominent avian vet in Connecticut who doesn't have companion birds. Does that make her a lesser quality vet? Well, most people would say no. She's has a very excellent reputation, but these are things that you want to think about when you're getting an expert, or what you perceive to be an expert, or you're looking for help with behavior or veterinary care or something else.
Yeah. And so, again, and the last one is published, right? I'm not expecting everybody to be published, but if they have stuff like blogs, right? I always say blogs are opinions, right? Even if they put reference materials, it's still their opinion of something. And that's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And especially when they put references, you say, okay, but it's not a peer-reviewed article. This is their blog. This is their thought. And I always say, if it sounds good, great. I always use it. And there's a lot of people who I follow who have blogs, and I use it as reference material, because what I do is I take what they reference and I go read that paper, because I'm curious of why they wrote it this way. So I go read their material. If there's no reference material, then you're kind of curious of why they have that opinion, right? Or why they wrote it that way. What drove them. So blogs are fine. Again, they're people's thoughts. If there's articles on animal websites, again, is it being edited? Who's sponsoring it? You just got to look at stuff. When we get into published magazines, same thing. There are some magazines that they'll just take anybody who will write anything and they'll just take it and they'll fine. Others, will scrutinize it a little. Again, books. Then to me, there's two forms of research papers. There are research papers, but they haven't been peer reviewed yet. So they're in this process and they're explaining stuff, but nobody's peer reviewed them. And then there are research papers that have been peer reviewed. And the question again is, when you're talking to whoever the professional expert is the reference material, their public material, important to you? Do you want somebody who has at least written something? It may not matter, right? but it's just something to think about when you're looking at it.
You know what? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I keep interrupting, but I do want to keep this
No, no, it's open and direct. People jump in. I keep watching the chat. So I'm like, so I want people jump in and go, Sheila, what are you thinking?
It's important because, I've given, as a lot of you know, I've given a bunch of lectures myself about various bird topics. And one point I always bring up is there's very little research with birds. So you have to decide what you accept and not accept. And one of the places this comes up with is with toxicities. So when someone says, I was cooking this or I was doing this and my bird died, that's one piece of anecdotal evidence. Should you believe that or not? Then a second person says, well, I was doing the same thing and my bird died. How many does it take for you to accept that? Now, in the science world, you would normally say, well, we need to do a study and all that. But obviously, there's no humane way to take a bunch of parrots, put them in a room, expose them to something, see if any die or not, and then report the results. Most of us wouldn't stand for that. I mean, there is some bird research like that, particularly at UC Davis, where they have flocks of orange-fronted Amazons and cockatiels, and they do research like that. And I find it horrifying, but that's unfortunately how we have arrived at some of the conclusions we've arrived at. But the question is, how much information do you need? So I'll give you an example. So maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little longer, someone reported they bought some planked salmon at the grocery store. And if you go to the grocery store, you'll see cedar planked salmon all the time there. And they put in their oven and then the birds died. And I think 1 or 2 other people reported it. Well, that's not a lot of reports. That's not enough to really reach a scientific conclusion. But in the bird world, we don't have a lot of information. So that, to me personally, that's enough information to say, don't do this. Can I prove it? No. Do I want to risk my own birds' lives to prove or disprove it? Absolutely not. So in the bird world, we have to accept a lot less information a lot of time under the understanding that it might not be right, but our most important thing is to protect our birds. And why risk something due to a lack of uncertainty? So we don't peer-reviewed research papers, there aren't a lot of them in the bird world. In other areas of life, we want to see those peer-reviewed research papers, but we just don't have those resources. So we have to do the best we can with birds.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in on Amy with it. So because some of you know, she said, like, I do some training over at the Rhode Island Parrot Rescue, and I've been doing some educational programs. And I go read some of these research papers because when I'm doing something, I want to make sure whatever I'm explaining came from something, right? Now, what's interesting, as Amy said, is a lot of the research isn't always related to companion birds. It is related to a parrot or a species, but it isn't in the form of, oh, we built this house, we did this, we set up the scenario. It's usually we have them in a cage and we put them in front of whatever the scenario is, right? It's not always set up in the most regional way, and it would be nice to see these things. Also, a lot of the research papers that are out there for our birds are related to how they are in the wild, which is different than in our homes. And so I have to be, and this is why I bring it up. This is why I'm very careful when we talk about our birds, and some people will, I'm not trying, I don't want to say some people, that's not right. I don't want to generalize. But let's just put it this way, in topics, how about this? In topics, it may come up of, hang on, I want to make sure I get the wording right. I'm having so much fun, I lost my thought. I will come back to it. It will come back. I know it has to do with the research papers. I've read so many of them. It's funny. So I got to come back to my thought. But one thing I wanted to say with research papers, one, you want to look at the number of birds that are in the research paper, because there are some wonderful papers out there that sound really great, but the number of birds they used were like 3. And back to Amy's point, 3 is not always enough to say, is that whatever they found true? And that's always on the bottom of the research. It always says more research is needed. So it doesn't always help you on these things. Oh, I know what my thought was, but I knew it'd come back around. Sometimes we compare behavior, and this is what's hard because the research isn't really out there. We compare our birds to what they would be like in the wild. And I have trouble with this. I do my best to balance it, but I will tell folks I have trouble with this because, and I'm just picking on cockatiels because it's fun, because I like them too. Well, the cockatiel I probably rescued or whatever was not born out in the wilds of Australia, right? He was born in someplace. I'm going to pretend he was born in a nice breeder home with this nice thing and all this stuff, but probably has never seen the sun, probably doesn't know what the wind is, and probably doesn't know how to go hunt for seed in the lands, right? He's happy. This little cockatiel is happy that us humans become DoorDash and bring it food in the bowls, right? So that's what I was saying, that it's very hard when we talk about, oh, what does the bird do in the wild? That's what it should do here. I have to balance that because I don't know if this particular, yes, they have some genetics. I'm not going to fight that. There are genetic trademarks, but I think environment comes into play as well. But I will move on to Amy. I know I'm moving along. I think the other one I wanted to really look at is I went out, talk about research, and was looking at what parrot, they call them parrot, certifications are out there, all right? And how do you get it? How does it qualify, right? Now, again, there are people out there who may not have any of these certifications who say they're an expert or they're a parrot person. We'll come back to that question. But for those who say they are parrot, they have a certificate or something, these are the ones I could find that had parrot. I want to be very specific, parrot in it. Okay. Now, IAAB-C, International Associations of Animal Behavior Consultant, which I've got my certification from, they have a very grueling way of getting your certificate. They ask, you have to go get mentored. You've got to go have 500 hours of behavioral consulting, 400 hours of coursework, and to pass, there's an exam, there's 3 case studies, it's a third-party accredited. Okay? But by the time you finish it, you still have to pay their yearly membership, you have to do continuous education, you get a CPBC after your name. So they're accredited, they go through all of that, right? And it is mostly focused on companion birds. They do talk about in the exams and what you have to study for. If you were working in a zoo and stuff, there are things you kind of have to know there. Now, it's not in depth because it's more about training, but again, you need to know some stuff. The certified professional bird keeper, again, you have to pass this grueling exam. They have some stuff as well, but it is, again, they are more focused on zookeepers and training in those fields, right? Again, it can be used for companion bird, but it's more in the focus of that. Again, if you pass it, you get the CPBTKA, afterwards. Credited. There is the Companion Animal Science Institution. They have a Parrot Behavior Science Technology, PBST. It's an online 35 course program. You do have to pass an exam. It's not accredited. You do have to take continuous. You do get this little PBST, but it's not, as accredited as the other two. Now, I went and looked around. There is a bunch of applied animal behavior certifications out there you can take. I did take this one, but it was the only one that had an inkling. They had a small section about parrots. A lot of the other ones do not even go down that road. It is a college certification. It's accredited. You get your UW-AAB after your name. And there, there's a couple exams, but you do have to do one little research paper. So they do put you to work during those 9 months. It's not easy. You can also go to the Pet Professional Guild, and you can get your own companion bird behavior training professional thing with a yearly membership. Here you go. And you can put that on there. Same thing with IBP. They have a little coursework. You can't really see it. It's a little course, and you pay your yearly membership, and you get your avian pet care specialist. And then there's Fear Free, which also has a veterinarian certification for avian professional. You take a little coursework, you pass your exam, and you get a cute little thing that says you're a professional. You get a cute, I know you guys can't all see it, but yeah, because I've taken a lot of courses with them. I'm now elite. So I am elite certified, so I get a cute little badge. And I'll tell, but again, to all of you, this is up to you to decide what is important. And what I was telling Amy yesterday when I talked to my avian vet, and I was going through all my credentials because I was trying to get her, to promote me. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll try to do it. Can I put my card at your desk so that because she's an avian vet, and it was really funny because I said, hey, I passed this IAAB-C certification, and she didn't care. She's like, she really did. She said, did you go to college? Did you do this? How many people? What's your client? Like, she drilled me on stuff. What's your methodology? What do you think about this? Do you recommend vet? Like, she really drilled me. So she didn't care one bit about this certification whatsoever. It was like, to her, it was like, well, you're just giving money. I want to know about you and what is you're doing. So I don't know. I'll be honest, for everybody out there, I think if you're looking for someone and you want to say, I want somebody who really invested their time, right? They invested time to go do this stuff, right? I mean, I'm telling you, getting the certified parrot behavior consultant, right? And I want to be careful. It says behavior consultant because we're going to come back to that word. I always say behavior trainer because I had to invest a lot. It took me 3 years before I got this accreditation, right? It took time. I had to really it kicked my ass, I'll tell you. Same thing with the applied animal behavior certification. That thing kicked my ass. Sorry to swear on this. Bleep, bleep. So I figure to all of you, I'm investing time and learning stuff so I can bring it to you guys. So you don't have to go through all the 500 hours of training. I want to bring it to you.
That's a very good point, Sheila. Because I've been sort of I'm kind of like your vet. I'm not too impressed by the credentials, but that is a very valid point. The person doesn't necessarily know more than somebody else or is a better behavioral consultant or whatever, but it does show at least that they are invested in spending time trying to better themselves and in trying to be in the parrot world. So that does count for something. I do want to mention that fear-free one. I've always been really skeptical of that because I feel like they're trying to tell me that unless you take that course, you're going to cause fear in my birds. It's like trying to say that if an avian vet isn't fear-free certified, then they're going to terrorize my birds, and that's just not true. And I don't feel like you need a certificate to. It's like you see these dentists who advertise as painless. Well, first of all, to me, that's kind of how can you be a dentist and have no pain, cause no pain? I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron to me. But I just don't see that as sort of a real thing. I mean that somebody.
Some of the and there's some avian vets who have it. I will tell you because I did take the course. And I know who wrote it. but again, I won't no name dropping in this. And it wasn't, there was a couple of sections that weren't easy to pass, I'll tell you that much. But that all being said, I would say what the outcome of it is, and since I've taken it, right, is what they're trying to say is when you're bringing your companion bird in, and they have a fear factor. They have it broken down into if it's F1, F2, blah, 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 blah. If this bird is just stressed beyond belief, it is just, and I think it's F4. Like this bird is just, hyperventilating. It is just panicking. What they're trying to say to the vets and everybody is, then stop the exam. It isn't, just stop the exam, reschedule it, do something else, or see if we can get the bird to calm down, because what they're trying to show is sometimes the test results could screw up because this bird is so stressed out, and they don't want to hurt the bird at that fear level. They need it to come down. Now,
but shouldn't a vet know to do that anyhow without having to take a course?
I'm going to come back to that question because I'm going to hold that question.
Well,
okay.
I know the answer is because I've certainly heard enough horror stories.
Yeah, I was going to say, hold that question.
Then maybe taking this course, if a vet takes this course, it will at least make them more aware of the situation rather than saying, this bird has an appointment and I am going to get this done. I don't care what the bird is acting like. So maybe it's more of an awareness thing. I just don't.
Right. And it may be also to us, right? The client, right? If the bird is over the threshold, and I'm not talking a little threshold. I'm really talking about this bird who's thrashing and is just hyperventilating. We're probably sitting there going, we should cancel this. Us, the client, are sitting there going, you know what, I should really can't, but right, even any of us, I brought many of my birds to the avian vet. And I don't know if any of you have experienced this, where he's fine, right? And then that blue shirt of a dog, like the vet techs come in and the bird's like, oh, hi, how are you doing? Oh, this is great. Oh, wow, wow. Right? And everything looks good. Then the blue shirt of the vet comes in and the bird goes, I know who you are, and just starts panicking, right? My birds knew. They knew, and I kept telling my vet to change the color of the vet thing, but knew. Now, they never got to the F4, right? But they got to a couple of things. But there were times where I should have just said, you know what, it's not worth them doing the nails at this time, right? Or it's not worth them doing that at this time. But there are going to be scenarios for all of you, right, where whatever the medical purpose is, sometimes you say, well, yes, they're spiked, but can we put them in a room, calm them down, and do it, because it may, I always say, I need that result. I need that medical test. I need it because it's the health of my bird, right? It isn't, oh, I'm just bringing him in to do something. I need it. And they have options of how to make the bird a little more relaxed, I guess is the word.
I guess it's just the name of the cert.
Yeah. And they're all called Fear Free is the company.
It's like you're guaranteeing your bird's not going to be afraid, and then your bird is afraid, and they're like, well, you have this certification, just like going to one of these pain-free dentists, Yeah,
I don't like dentists. I think their equipment looks like something used in a car. I say that to my dentist. I say that to my dentist all the time, and the dental person, because she, they roll. Sorry to digress. They rolled the thing out, and you're looking at it going, those are all things I would use to clean my car, not my teeth. But all right. So here's for everybody, and again, you guys can jump in. I saw some great comments in here. Back to, okay, well, what's an expert? Again, it's back to what's important to you and your need, right? Because, and I tried to we've got a list here, and I put some questions and some value. And again, a lot of this is, some of it relates to cost and value, right? What's their cost? What's their value? But also, what are they promoting? And do you've got to do a little more asking, right? So again, and I put these in there because Amy and I were talking about this. So like avian nutrition dietary consultant that I could find, there were no specific degrees focused on parrot nutrition and dietary, right? Degrees. There are some certificates on animal stuff, but specific I could not find. Not to, So, in some states, I'm not saying in all, there are some states, I did go look this up, only the veterinarian is supposed to give out avian nutrition information. Now, it's not in all states, and I thought Mass was one of them. Of course, I wrote it down and I lost my piece of paper. But we have to look because veterinarians are very controlling of things they give out, and nutrition is one of them. So that's why I think there isn't any degrees in that, because there may be a veterinarian, conflict on it. But anyway, with that, if we're looking, right, and we're looking for the best health to improve the health of our birds, right? I'm not against it. If there is somebody, I'd like to know how many years they've been in business. How did they become one? Like, how did they gain this knowledge? What started it? How did they do it? What is their latest research? Like myself, I have no problem if the person's changed, right? They had one formula, they've changed it because they learned something. They've changed it because that's okay with me. That because I know they're learning. But also look at are they independent, or is somebody sponsoring them too, right? Like, you want to kind of know these things. And then from it, for your value, right? Cost value. Are they just selling a product? Like, are they just trying to get you to buy into something? Or is there more information and they're doing research? And maybe there's a little bit of a service cost because they're doing more research and they want to say, oh, you're one of the birds, we're doing the research, and review the ingredients, right? I'm going to fold this because I don't want to give the name of the person. Somebody had asked me to try their nutritional thing. It's going to be backwards, but they gave me their list of all the ingredients in the product they had me try. And the only comment I had to them, because I did some research, was they said, oh, you got to add water, and the water needs to be heated to put this in there. And I asked, why doesn't it need to be heated? Because I wasn't sure if some of the nutrition that was on here would have got boiled out in the water. And they said, oh, no, you don't drain the water out. You only put enough water, it warms it up, and the water gets absorbed into this product. Again, it's not product, I call it that, but there's fruits, vegetables, there's oats, there's pasta in there and stuff. I've tried it. One of my birds like it. Yeah, the bird doesn't. It's not killing them. It looks healthy. I don't know. I was just trying it. But that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
Now go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, before we leave avian nutrition.
Yep, it's all yours.
I just want to say how, first of all, what Sheila said about the ingredients is really important, because you want to look at the ingredients and go, do I recognize those things? Are they generally recognized as safe? GRAS, that's a term that the FDA uses when determining if something is, or if a food is allowed to be marketed, because it contains the same sorts of things that were already recognized generally as safe. But as Sheila said, there are no degrees in this, so how do you know if somebody is providing reasonable information that you can take? One way is to look at those ingredients. We recently had a talk by Jason Crean. You'll notice that we refer to Jason as Dr. Jason Crean. What is his doctorate in, though? If you actually look at his website, you'll see his doctorate is in education, not in avian nutrition or biology or anything like that. We call him doctor as a sign of respect, but you have to keep in mind that that doctorate is not related to his work in nutrition. It doesn't mean he's any less knowledgeable, and Jason is considered one of the experts in avian nutrition. Well, how did he get that way? I don't really know his origin story other than from the website, but over the years of promoting various products, people have had good results. Their birds have been healthy. They've gotten good veterinary test results. They have thrived using Jason's paradigms of food. He sells good products. As Sheila says, he sells products on his website, but that's not his reason for existing, unlike some TikTok influencers, particularly with things like beauty products, who their whole existence is to sell these beauty products. Jason's existence is to do research on avian nutrition, and then he just happens to sell products that he believes in, mostly so people have a place to find these things, because after you recommend something, the first question someone's going to ask is, okay, great, where can I get that? But, you know, Jason is considered an expert in this, but what has made him an expert in this? And that's one of the things we're getting to the heart of in tonight is, when do you cross over from being somebody who writes an article to becoming an expert in the eyes of other people? And there is no hard and fast answer to that. It's mostly when the preponderance of people say, hey, this person really knows what they're doing. They give good advice that has borne out to give good results. So I'm going to consider them an expert when I'm looking for things. I'm sure if, as we said earlier, if you were to say to Jason, are you an expert? He would say, oh, no, I'm not an expert. I'm just doing work and trying to find good things for birds. But as we said earlier, but again, what makes somebody an expert? But just to keep that in mind, he's probably one of the leading experts in avian nutrition, but we don't have any specific criteria, except to say that he is doing active research. He is constantly updating what he does based on the results of those research. So those are things that we take as important in determining if someone is an expert.
Right. I think the other one who does research, is it Harrison?
Well,
Harrison,
those companies are also actively doing research. So particularly, I say Harrison's and Lefebvre's, but
yeah,
the
I
other
got those.
companies, some of the major pellet companies or bird food companies do a lot of active research. And we kind of forget that they're named after real people.
Right.
So Harrison is a real person. Ted Lefebvre is Lefebvre and all that. So
Yeah, I got to meet Dr. Harrison at one point in my life. So anyway, it's just something, you know, to keep in mind. The next two subjects right next to each other for you guys is where I have avian trainer consultant, no certification, and certified, right? And there are, like I said, some of my mentors do not have certifications. Now, they've gone back and got some education, right? But they got it kind of after the fact that they became. But I look at them as they were kind of in the beginning stages of this, right? So there's, you know, I'll name drop, what the heck, right? Because we all know her. Like I know Barbara Heidenreich, Laura Joseph, right?
Lyra, yeah.
Yeah, when they started off, it isn't like they had a degree or anything, but they did their research and they went back and questioned things and and from all and went out and did this thing and then worked on it and worked on it. And I mean, again, I remember, you know, I met Laura years ago when she was just starting off. But she was the one. And if you go back and you go watch some of her really early Coffee with Critters, way back, right? They're kind of fun to watch because you get to see how she was learning and where she was getting the science from, right? I mean, now she's into alligators. I got to give her credit. But and she's gone back to school and I believe has got like applied behavior now. Like she's gone, same with Barbara. Barbara has got, you know, but it was after the fact. Why do I think they're experts, right? Why do I think, you know, these people are experts without it? Because I've seen their work, right? I've seen their work. I've seen what they've written, right? They give you the science. They tell you where it came from. They're not hiding anything, right? They're very straight. Where did I get this from? They'll also tell you, like I said, and that's where I think this is, I will admit I'll try to do some of this, is they also say where they screwed up, right? They'll talk about, oh, you know, guess what? I did this, didn't work. This is why. Did this. You know, if anybody wants to learn about the Rocky story, that's a good one to watch, you know, of her, you know, because Rocky had this, you know, vocalization that would go on. And I remember, like I said, I got to go there. So it's just good to ask these questions, right? and how did they get referred and what they published and what their services are. And again, cost and value, right? So, when we get into certified, right, there's not a lot of us in the big scheme of things, but there are a lot of us who are IABC certified, who are out in the world, right? I would say our framework are all the same, right? Our science, where we got our stuff is probably the same. How we teach might be different. And this is important. I kind of wrote this on here. If you are going to hire one of these people, I'm putting myself in the pool as well, whoever you're going to hire. One of the questions you should kind of ask, and I try to be upfront with some of the people I talk to, is to make sure the personality and the training method matches what you need, right? Because, and what is their guarantee? And I'll be honest, and people, I'm going to say this, I'll probably, I got this on too. These are still wild birds to me, right? And training, teaching, doing all this stuff to me, I can't guarantee 100% that if you do this, this is going to work. All I can do is say, if we work at this together with what I understand and what you're telling me, and we train together and we do this, there's a good chance we'll reduce the issue or we'll gain the issue depending what we're doing. But there are some trainers out there who will guarantee 100% if you follow their criteria, 100% fix the issue. And I love them for it. But
yeah, I gotta be honest, someone said that to me, I wouldn't hire them because I would know that it would be impossible to guarantee. If I go to a car mechanic and they guarantee they can fix my issue, perfectly fine with me. But anyone who guarantees they can fix my bird is somebody who, to me, is somebody who's too arrogant to know that they don't know what they don't know.
Right. But I just want to but that's why it's important. I want to bring this up for anybody when you're hiring somebody. It's okay to, you're asking for a service for them to help, right? And I try, like when I respond to people, I try to tell them how I do stuff, and I'll admit that we're not going to fix it overnight. Not happening, right? I straight out, and if they say, hey, Sheila, I don't want to work with you because of that. Okay. And I'll give them other people. Here's some other people, and let them, because I want you to find the right person that fits for you, right? It is not me about trying to sell my service. I want the bird to succeed. So I want you to find the person that works for you. And that's why it's important when you're looking at these people and who you're going to hire. Yes, you're looking at cost and value and you're looking at these questions, but also just say, hey, can we have a 10-minute, because I just want to talk to you, or send them some questions. And if they get kind of snuffly about your questions, maybe that's not the right person for you, right? I just want to give you those values, right? That's what, when you're trying to hire an expert, and I'm going to use a different example. I've gone through this, right? When you're trying to hire somebody to do something in your house, right? Have you ever been ghosted? Like you ask them questions and they're gone. They just disappear. I don't know where they went, right? And others might send you some kind of well, it'll cost you this enormous amount and this is why, and they get kind of snuffly with you and you go, why didn't you just say, no, I don't have time? I'd be quite happy with that answer, right? So that's what these questions I have in here. And again, Amy is going to share these slides, and you're welcome to, ask questions along the way on these. I've gone long and I didn't mean to. I'm going to go to the next one because Amy's a little better with this than I am on this one. But
yeah, I do want to actually a question for you, Sheila. As far as you know, do most behaviorists, trainers, etc., allow you to talk to them first for a bit to get a feel for the personality and work before you get into the paid sessions?
And that's a good question. And the person and I think you should ask, because if someone said to me, and I've offered it with some people, right? Sometimes I'll do a Q&A, free Q&A session, half an hour. We'll talk, right? I might have them fill. I do have a contract. It isn't like a contract you have to stick with me. It's just I need some bird information, and just here's how we do, I call it the legal stuff, right? But if you just wanted to talk to me, I have no problem. We do a half an hour, you should chat with me. And if you say, hey, Sheila, this was great, but my training goes this way. I'd like to go use someone else. Cool, no problem. Here's some other people, or yeah, I want to use you. So I have no problem with it. I believe there's a few trainers who have no problem with it. But there are other trainers. Again, it's split. There are some trainers who say, yeah, we can have the Q&A, but it costs you, which I think that's unfair. But hey, it's people's time. I don't want to take time away.
Yeah, that would turn me off a bit, because I have my own experience dealing with trainers and behaviors, and some are fit and some are not, and I would kind of like to know that ahead of time.
Right. So again, anybody who's ever interested, you're always welcome to ping me. Now I'm going to say this, and then I'm going to pass a little bit to Amy. So I will say I am a professional certified. I always say companion bird, and there's a reason I say that. Trainer or consultant that helps with behavior and training. Now, why I say companion bird is because I don't work at a zoo. I don't do all this stuff. Now, I have trained some chickens and roosters, so I could say, so I kind of put those under companion birds, right? Because, but why I specify it is because I want people to know that's what I work on. It's an animal that's in your home that you consider a companion. So I don't do sparrows or cardinals that are outside. I don't do, and I don't do zoos. Other people, and the other reason I also say this, for all of you out there, some reason the word parrot, when people hear parrot, think, oh, you don't do parakeets. Oh, you don't do these, because parrot is such a general term. You think big birds and you don't think, oh, they don't do cockatiels or something. So that's why I don't like that word, because now I feel like I've isolated, I've excluded people I want to include in. So that's why I do that. Now, avian behaviorist is different, and I had to go look it up. I mean, that's why it's on this thing. I had to go look up there, and I do say this when people ping me and say, oh, are you a behaviorist? And I say no, because I do not have veterinarian schooling. I don't have vet tech knowledge. I don't have any of this schooling. There are veterinarian behaviorists, which are licensed veterans or certain things, and they are very specific. Now, again, you have to ask those questions. What's the true difference? I would say, one, they really deep down into the root. So again, somebody calls me about a certain issue, and I'm sorry to go down this road, but I may say, that kind of sounds like medical. You gotta go visit. Can you go to the vet first and clear it before we go? And I may tell you on certain things I may say, could you go to the Avian vet, which we'll talk about more. Because here's the other thing. If your bird's in pain in some form, they can't train, right? Any of us have ever been in pain. It's not easy for us to focus on doing training of any sort. So how can I expect this bird who may have something we don't know about, and that's why it's causing things not to work? I'm not going to try to figure a training plan if there's an issue. An avian behaviorist has that medical knowledge and the behavior, so they can go down to the root cause. So that was why I wanted to specify the difference.
But Sheila, I have to jump in here. The problem that may be, I'm going to take your word for it that that's the legal definition, but in the general,
we both got that cough.
Yeah, companion bird world, avian behaviorist does not mean that to 99% of people. Avian behaviorists, 99% of people is what people like you do. So that's how we use the term. We do not use the term to refer to somebody who has veterinary training. So everyone else out there doing the work that you do is calling themselves an avian behaviorist. And
I'm the one sitting there going, I'm a trainer.
The thing is, with lots of things in life, there are things that are the actual definition, and then there are the way people use terminology. Right. People do think of you as an avian behaviorist, and I'm very careful when I write up anything about you to not use that term, because I know you don't use it. But the reality is, when people are looking for an avian behaviorist, I will send them to you or to
Right.
give them some other names as well. And that's how the term is commonly used. So,
Yeah.
I understand that you want to shy away from it, but we think of an avian behaviorist as someone who does not have veterinary training and is somebody like you.
It's the Quaker parrot monk parakeet syndrome. Maybe it's the same thing. Maybe it's the categories. But again, however we term it, right? I would say, if the person does say if they're really quoting their name, like I said, I hear what you're saying, Amy, and to all of you, I hear what you're saying. Again, I'd still ask questions, right? Just ask questions. Now, Amy, I'm going to pass this to you because I'm going to run up and get water because you're really good at this.
I'm just so hoarse. I've done so much talking the last day. I do have a lot of
yeah.
vocal stamina, but
we'll do this to all of you, or we could do this in a sentence. We probably can do this in a sentence and open up the conversation again. There are general veterinarians, there are avian veterinarians, there are board certified avian veterinarians. For your birds, when you're right now, because they're so far and few between, right? Wherever we're living, right? To find these. And Amy, I will go back and look because I did find there was one, I think it's in California, and I'll go find it if I can, one online avian veterinarian that you can do a session online with. Now you say, well, what good is that? But if you're having I always say, sometimes we all have that question, like, oh, do I bring it? I thought, gee, an online person would be good to say, is this a scenario where I really need to start calling someone, or is it a simple, no, it's fine, just let the bird rest or something? So I thought that was an interesting.
There are also a lot of people who don't have access to an avian veterinarian in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, there's one. If I find it, I'll send it to you guys because I remember this from something. But
I think that is a very useful resource to have. And of course, poison control is a very useful resource.
Yeah.
They do have bird people at poison control. So if your bird ingests something, you can feel free to call them. From what I've heard, they do have a number of people who do have expertise in birds. So you can feel free to call them for a bird, not just for a dog or cat. But yeah, I want to say a few things about the veterinary things that obviously everyone loves a board certified avian vet, but first, there aren't a huge amount of them. Second of all, doesn't guarantee they're good. I have been around enough years and heard enough horror stories to know that even people who go to a board certified avian vet have had really bad experiences that you wouldn't think an avian vet would ever do. I'm sure there are people on this call I know of who have had that issue. And somebody doesn't have to be board certified to be good. And not just in avian medicine, but in everything. But I think even more so in something like this, my vet, the vet I use most of the time, is not board certified. She has decades of experience in avian medicine. She just never sat for the exam. She is eligible. She's completed all training and everything else to do that. I put her up against any board certified avian vet in the state in quality. So you don't have to be board certified. The kinds of things you want to look for is how many birds do they do? Do they see a lot of birds, or are they seeing one bird a month? That's the kind of question you want to ask. You want to ask if they're a member of the Association of Avian Veterinarians. Anyone can join. There are no criteria. But just as Sheila mentioned with people who take the courses, the fact that someone does spend a little bit of money to join AAB and hopefully reads the papers, maybe attends a conference or something, shows they have the interest. They may not have all the answers, but if they have the interest, they'll know how to look it up, who to talk to, and the care may be just as excellent as in somebody who's board certified, who maybe doesn't even participate in keeping up with things. So you can't use that as your only criteria. I think one of the most important things is finding out how many birds they see and what they do to keep moving forward with their knowledge.
Right.
A general veterinarian that never sees birds is obviously going to be your last choice. Sometimes it might be your only choice depending on where you live. I've had turtles most of my life. When I was growing up, one of our turtles cut open his leg, caught it on some wire. My mother and I rushed him over to one of the local vets. Had never seen a turtle, didn't work with reptiles at all. And I still to this day remember my mother yelling at him, "It's just a leg, get a needle and sew it up." Unfortunately, he didn't know about giving anesthesia or anything like that, but she was like, "Get a needle, get some thread, and sew up the wound. It's just, a wound is a wound." And she was right, and he did it, and my turtle did fine. So in a pinch, that the general veterinarian may also have the ability to call. So before I got my current avian vets, there's a vet literally half a mile from my house who does do birds. In fact, he did the birds for one of the major uh, raptor groups in the state. That's who I was bringing my birds to before I found my avian vet. He didn't know everything, but he knew a lot. And when he didn't know something, he would call up Dr. Giddings, who's long retired, but was the first avian vet we had in Connecticut. So he knew enough to know what he didn't know, and he knew how to get the information he needed. And that may be good enough for what you need. So, I know I love your word, Sheila, snuffly. People get snuffly about somebody not being board certified, but it's not the be all and end all. And you can have a perfectly good vet who's not board certified.
So we kind of so like I said, I know some of you put some text in it, and Amy will check the chat again. I'll shut the slide. I can keep the slides up, and I'll just open up the windows and stuff. But I wanted, again, to give people this opportunity, and Amy will share the slides for people.
Yeah, if anybody wants copies of the slides, let me know.
There's no secrets here. But I want to give you something with value, right? I want you to be able to walk away and now say, okay, when I look for whatever I'm looking for, here's the questions I need to kind of ask. Again, what is important to you, right? It's also about you, right? Is the information ask questions, right? Does it seem correct, right? And again, I will pick on a couple of YouTubes, right? And and we all know this, but I'm using it as an example, right? I'm watching a YouTube because I'm trying to help my bird step up. My bird stopped stepping up. I needed to step up. I go watch some YouTubes. When you're watching them, if the bird is bouncing to the back of the cage when the person's doing it, or doing it in a more, it's not jumping onto that perch going, yay, I'm on that perch. I would say, question that and say, why? Why when the person says, look, he's jumping on, but he's pushing the perch on the foot, or he's pushing this onto the chest, or, he's showing the food, the bird gets on the perch but gets off, or he grabs the food and takes it off. I always tell people, question that, right? Because any of you who have ever had any of your birds step up, right? They jump up freely. They're like, I'm on you and we're going for a ride, right? They're like, yeah, not all, I'm just saying some. That's you want, when you're watching anybody who's doing it, you want engagement, right? You want to see the person's engaged, you want to see the birds engaged. And it's okay if they have bloopers. I'm putting my own little videos together. I have bloopers, because I want people to know I make mistakes too. Oopsies, but from the oopsies, right, I can show people where I made a mistake. So when you go to do it, you go, okay, I got that, right? So that's why I say when you're reading some of this stuff, it's okay to question. Now, again, if you're on a social media and you question, you may get bumped out. The admin might throw your butt, but but if there's stuff you're seeing, question it. Not in a harassing way, just say, okay, I see this. Where are we going? Or, I just want to understand, is there science behind this, or is this your opinion, or is this experience? What's the guiding factors of those? because again, experience also, like I said, I've met a wonderful cockatiel breeder. She's a wonderful person. We sat down. I was only supposed to go to her house for an hour. I was there for 4 hours because she had information I didn't know, right? There were things I just, didn't know. And it is, I'm not going to say, oh, she's this huge cockatiel expert, but she knew stuff I didn't know. So we were exchanging knowledge, and it was a great tea and biscuit moment. We were having to go laugh about this back and forthness. And she would question me on something, and I would question her on something, but we weren't questioning in, oh, why are you doing that? It was, oh, that's kind of interesting. How come you chose to do it that way? And sometimes it was just practical, right? It was just, what I joke is, it was just something she did because it found it easier. Sometimes it was, but that's why I say, to any of you, when you're working on these things, or you have, a question, to, ask. Doesn't, and if, I don't know if snuffly will ever make it to the Webster dictionary, but that's what my word. If, what was the word? I think it has finally disappeared. I always hated it was awesome sauce, right? That made it to the Webster, and I really hated that word. Poor Dr. Pat Anderson, who has passed, but I used to say to her, I hate that word. And she goes, well, we'll see if it catches on. And the next thing I find, I've made it to the Webster dictionary. So maybe snuffly will make it, which just means kind of being snotty, but not exactly being snotty. They're being fluffy about it, but so that's why I call it snuffly, because they're just being snotty, but with a little fluff.
It's a really important point, though. And if you're looking to hire a behaviorist or a trainer, whatever, make sure they treat you with respect. You don't want to hire somebody that's being kind of nasty and condescending and patronizing to you from the get-go, because it's not going to go well. If you can't even get past that first meeting without feeling like a loser and inferior and incompetent, that's not somebody you want to work with, and you don't have to put up with it. There are a lot of behaviorists out there. You don't have to stick with somebody who's being a jerk to you. With a vet, you may not have as many options, but you deserve respect. You're out there trying to do the best thing possible for your bird. So don't let somebody make you feel like you are the worst bird owner in the history of the planet, and that, don't let them gaslight you into thinking that you don't know what you're doing and you've been doing everything wrong. And you don't have to put up with that. There are other options. And if you ask questions and they're nasty in reply, as Sheila said, that is not the person to work with. Anybody who is truly an expert or knowledgeable should be able to answer your questions, even if the answer is, gee, that's a good question. I will get to you. If they're hostile, then that's a person you don't want to work with.
And I will say, if you're having a Q&A session, it should be a mutual, sometimes I will admit, some of you know this, I get chatty, and I'll admit sometimes I get chatty. But I try to stop myself and ask the person, do you have, I would like input as well when I'm in the Q&A. But I never want to have the situation where I'm telling you something, meaning like, you have to listen to me during the Q&A for 30 minutes. That's not what it's about. I want to hear about your bird. I want to hear things. Like I said, sometimes I get a little chatty because I get excited. But that's what's important to me, because I want you to, I want you to meet who I am. Does my criteria, right? I'm going to call it criteria. It's not certificate. My criteria of how I teach, does that match what you want? May or may not. I'm going to use this word, Corey would say to me, you're a little fluffy when it comes to, you need to be a little more, broad to people. And that's not my goal, right? Because when I'm working with you, yes, the word is fluffy, but I would just say respectful. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to know. And if you can't do there's some, when I say to them, okay, here's the training plan. I could tell by facial expressions. I'm really good at this now. If I will say to you, okay, here's what the training plan is, and I get this look, there is a look, we all do it, where you're thinking in your head, I don't have time to do this, right? I can pick it up pretty quickly, and I'll say, can you be a 1-minute trainer? Can you just do this for 1 minute, right? If you can't do it for, can you do it for 30 seconds, right? I will, because we're all busy, right? And if I give you a plan and the next week I meet with you and you say, well, I couldn't do it because of this, right? I'm not going to get mad at you. I'll say, okay, well, let's find what you can do, right? What can you do? We'll get there, we'll get there. So I just try, again, it isn't about me, but I want you to take what I'm telling you when you're talking to other people, right? And you say to them, yeah, I great plan. I'm busy. Can I have a smaller version of it? Can we just do it this way? And they should be like, okay, yeah, we may have to adjust here and there. And you say, okay, that's fine. Because I want you to be successful. I want the bird to be successful. And that's what trainer, behaviorist, and veterinarian should all be doing, is how do we all be successful in this? And that's how I'm going to end it.
Yeah, what Sheila says is so important. There are a lot of behaviorists out there, and I and other people get asked all the time, who do you recommend? I'm having this problem. And I generally give people a list, but it's important to note that this is, again, it's not like taking a car to the mechanic. There are a lot of reasons why you may gel with one behaviorist and not with another. Their attitudes, their procedures, their plans, how they go about things. So you don't want to necessarily give up. Well, the first person couldn't fix my bird, so therefore my bird is unfixable. And one of the reasons Sheila and I get along so well, all these years that I've known her, is she's so extremely flexible about everything. And I have run across other behaviors who are very dogmatic. They make you fill out a 3-page form, and you're like, this is too much homework before we even get started. And then, they have this is how we're going to do it. It's very dogmatic, and they make you feel like a failure if you're not. It's like, oh, you haven't practiced your piano enough this week for the piano teacher kind of thing. And want somebody who's going to meet you where you are, not where they want you to be. And so you may need to do different people before you get to the one you gel with. But hopefully, if you can do an introductory session, you can suss out the kind of person they are. But it's a very individual thing. But I'm hoping over the course, I know it's quite late already, but over this evening that we point out some of the things you should at least be looking for and thinking about when you're getting a behaviorist, when you're getting a veterinarian, when you're reading things online, when you're choosing who to believe about nutrition and health and everything else out there, because it's a very confusing world out there for us right now. And none of us want to harm our birds. We're here because we want to have a great relationship with them and do best by them, but it can be confusing about who to trust. Would anybody like to jump in and make any comments before we close down for the night?
Yeah, we went long. I'm sorry, folks. See, this is what happens when you have these open discussions. Oh, Janet, yeah.
Well, Louise wrote, I agree on that.
I don't know if anyone heard me, but I said it was very interesting. Sorry, I was jumping up and, back and forth, but I was listening.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Janet, I hope it helped, right? I mean, I know it's being recorded, but, just call it food for thought. And, Amy, I'll say to you, maybe we'll come up with a different topic at some point in the future and come up with something else to just kind of batter around. And other people, I know a lot of you were kind of quiet and it's late and stuff. I get it. Trust me.
Well, I'm listening to the masters. Okay. So,
oh, that is more important. You're right. Okay.
So, I apologize for joining late, but sometimes I'm 86. I forget, when 7 o'clock is.
Well, you're on the West Coast, so it's not even, we started at 4 o'clock for you.
No, well, we appreciate you coming for this and just
Oh,
sitting in and listening to Amy and I batter back and forth. And yes, Louise, yeah. And for Janet, you do, Louise said the same thing. You do look great. I wouldn't have,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yeah,
You know,
well,
it's a pleasure to be with, the group, it's very interesting.
oh, happy to have you here. You and Gayla are regular attendees, so we love that.
I try as often as I can. I was eating a sweet potato. My bird hates sweet potatoes, but if I eat it, she will eat it.
Of course.
So that's why I was sitting here and we're sharing the sweet potato.
Oh,
That was my dinner.
a good one.
I said I'll be sending the video out and the slides again if people want to look them over to think about the questions they want to ask.
Mhm.
Thank you all for coming. Everybody who listens, thank you. It was great.
Thank
Amy,
you.
thank
It
you for
was-
having me